Now, our next witness is unusual today in the sense that she's not anonymous.
That's right.
And wishes to be known as Pauline. Pauline, please.
Please state your full name.
Pauline Reid.
And if you could take the book in your raised hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
At the outset of your evidence, Pauline, I should say that the names of your family and your location are redacted in your witness statement. They've been blanked out. We're going to try and avoid using them. But if they slip out, you've said that you're not particularly concerned and we won't be stopping the live stream if they do slip out. And that's what you'd prefer. Pauline, you have von Willebrand's disease.
I do.
You were tested when you were 12 years old.
That's
and what were you told?
I was borderline.
And then in 1985, when you were about 18,
That's correct.
you were diagnosed with von Willebrand's.
Yes.
And at that time, you were also tested for HIV and hepatitis B.
Not to my knowledge, no.
But subsequently, you've discovered...
It's been discovered in my medical records a letter confirming von Willebrand's and the testing for these other things, but not with prior consent or knowledge. In fact, I only found this out 8 days ago.
When you got your records 8 days ago?
Yeah.
Because at the point that you were diagnosed with von Willebrand's in 1985, you had no treatment.
No.
For obvious... It's rather obviously.
Yes.
And there was no reason to test for HIV or hepatitis B?
No. The von Willebrand's goes back at least 5. I kind of escaped. There has been genetic research done because normally it affects half the family members. But for my health, I was lucky. I had good health. I'd never had any accidents. I'd never even been in a hospital. Any bleeds were contained at home. I had never, ever had any treatment. Nothing.
Were you... You've said you didn't even know you'd been tested until 8 days ago. From that, we can also assume you were never told about any results of those, the
No.
HIV or hepatitis B?
Not at all, no.
Before 1990, so between 1985 and 1990, did you receive any treatment for your von Willebrand's?
No.
In 1990, you were pregnant with your first child.
That's correct.
You were known as a bleeder at that point. What were you told that you would need?
I had several routine and antenatal appointments at Glasgow Royal Infirmary and also at Ayrshire Central Hospital and Cross House Hospital. In the consultations, I knew that I would receive some form of treatment pre-birth while I was in labour, as a precaution.
You were advised that you would need something, but you weren't told the details of what?
No, it was never discussed what it would be, and I, like most people, just assumed that the doctors knew what they were doing, and I assumed it was whatever was the current product at the time.
Now, until very recently, you thought the advice about what you needed postpartum or before your birth, that advice had come from your treating hospital in Glasgow.
Yes.
But since you've looked at your records, you've discovered it was a decision made at your local hospital.
Yes.
What concerns you about that?
Well, Glasgow Royal Infirmary, being the haemophilia unit, are meant to direct all treatment plans. Anything that my family or myself have had, the treatment plan has always come from the haemophilia unit, although the treatment may be carried out at a local hospital. I thought that was the case. There are issues with communication between hospitals in North Ayrshire and the haemophilia unit, which are ongoing to this day. Although, to be perfectly fair, yes, clearly it's a very good haematology unit. I'm not saying it's not, but they are not specialists in bleeding disorders. And therefore, I, till recently, assumed that the treatment plan came from the haemophilia unit, who are experts in their field.
You've just told us that you were meant to be given the treatment before you gave birth.
Correct.
And that treatment was going to be cryoprecipitate.
Yes,
When, in fact, were you given it?
after birth, about 15 minutes after birth.
And at that point, how had the birth been?
Absolutely normal, no painkillers, very quick labour, spontaneous delivery, minimal bleeding, normal.
When you were given the cryoprecipitate, did anyone warn you of any possible risks of infection?
No.
And did anyone give you the option of whether to keep the cryoprecipitate on standby to use if you needed it?
No.
And if you'd been warned of the risks of infection, looking back, do you now think you'd have had the treatment?
Definitely not.
And why are you so adamant about that?
Would I have taken my chances in childbirth? As I say, 5 generations of women, older sisters, no treatment, survived. I would have rather taken my chances with childbirth than what I know now.
And that's largely because until then you'd really had very limited issues with bleeding.
Correct, yes.
Can we have document 2247003, please, Paul? This is a letter from 1992, and we can see a discussion about your von Willebrand's disease. And towards the end of the paragraph, it says viral studies have shown her to be positive for antibodies to hepatitis C virus. Were you told about this at the time in 1992?
No.
In 1994, you were pregnant and attended an appointment with the nurse. Can you tell us what happened?
It was a routine, although I was pregnant, it was a routine von Willebrand's appointment at Glasgow Royal Infirmary. We tended to have it as a bit of a family day out, so I was accompanied by siblings and mother. It was completely normal. I went in, had the wee quick chat with whichever doctor it was, height, weight, arm out, bloods. And it's a very comfortable, familiar setting, nurses you've known for years. I must have been due to go on holiday, and I was handed a leaflet and told, read that, but not till you come back from your holidays. That was it. So I went away with a very, maybe 3-page leaflet, which I proceeded to read straight away, and it told me something about an infection they'd found, which was of a hepatitis nature called non-A, non-B, and there really wasn't much more information in that at all, and I read it. Didn't think it was given to me specifically. Assumed that all patients were having it, went away on holiday, came back, and the next appointment I had, I was on my own because it was obviously an antenatal appointment, and that's when the truth of the situation came out.
And what happened at that appointment?
I walked in, sat down, I can't remember who it was, and they said to me, "You got the leaflet?" "Yep." "Did you read the leaflet?" "Yes." And then there was silence. Nothing. And eventually I was told, "Well, you have it." And that was pretty much the discussion. I think I was told at the time that the most accurate way of knowing what was going on was to have a liver biopsy, but that wasn't being done since I was pregnant, and it would be done after I had delivered. That was it.
At that point, were you told when you'd been tested for hepatitis?
No.
And at that point, were you given any information about how you might have been infected?
There were comments to do with intravenous drug use and sexual transference, which, to be perfectly honest, I have later described as being basically told I was either a junkie or a prostitute. There was never any mention that, and there has never been to this day, any direct mention to me that it could have been from my first childbirth.
What were you told about treatment options?
At that time, only that a liver biopsy would be done after my second child was born.
And were you told anything at that stage about prognosis?
Nothing, no. There was no other information at all.
Were you given any chance at that stage to ask questions?
No, it was a very, very brief, one-sided, to be honest, conversation. Wasn't really a conversation.
Later that day, you got a telephone call from your GP.
I did.
What did they say?
It was my GP directly, not the receptionist, and he was very angry. He was swearing and shouting, and he clearly had been given this information and wanted me to come down to the surgery after it was closed for a discussion.
And you've said in your statement that he said, "Why didn't you tell me?"
Yes, I went down after 6 o'clock when the surgery was closed. Everyone had left, all staff, and he continued to rant, and he was asking me why I didn't tell him. Yes.
But we've seen already the letter that we just had up, a letter from 1992 to your GP telling him that you were hepatitis C positive. You've only discovered that very, very recently.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that?
As in my statement, I couldn't understand why he was angry because I had only found out at the same time, more or less as him. I would clearly have told him as my, or the practice, as my primary carers of this, the first time I was down. He was known to be a bit fiery, but that was fair enough. I made the assumption that he had just been told. I have since discovered another letter, which is from the GP, because obviously I was pregnant, to obstetrics. There's a phrase in it where it says this was brought up in 1992, which I wasn't aware of, and I thought when I discovered this only 8 days ago that maybe the GP thought that I was party to this brought up conversation 2 years earlier and had kept it from him. Half an hour after discovering this 8 days ago, I found the letter to the GP more than 2 years before, and it's addressed to the same. I did make excuses and say that it's a practice. It might not have been him, although he should have seen it, but it's addressed to him. So he knew 2.5 years before me. So really, the person who should have been shouting and swearing and asking, why did you not tell me, should have been me. But I only discovered this 8 days ago.
You said in your statement that after he'd stopped shouting at you, the only information he gave you was that you had the sword of Damocles hanging over you.
Yeah. And as previously stated by other people, yes, I accept that in those days, certainly GPs wouldn't have known much. I can totally accept that. And, you know, in the short space of time when he calmed down, that was basically all I could say. You know, the future will be what the future will be.
Now, at that point in time, you weren't you were worried, but you've said you weren't particularly terrified of the diagnosis. We're not going to name any individuals, but there were others in your much wider family who were very unwell at this point, and you came to understand through them a little bit more of what hepatitis C meant. How did that knowledge then impact your own mental well-being?
Very detrimentally. Like I said, there was no information given at the hospital, nothing to implicate it was something that was potentially fatal. The leaflet had made, it was a very brief statement of it might affect your liver. The GP didn't really imply that either. And as previously stated, although I went up every year to the Royal for my routine check-up, I didn't have bleeds, so I wasn't about the centre on a regular basis. I therefore wasn't in the know about any discussions about what hepatitis C really was. But through my family, I discovered exactly how serious and fatal it was, and subsequently through the years how horrible the treatments were. And at that point, the realisation struck that this wasn't some maybe insignificant thing, this was potentially fatal, and I had to look at my future, my family's future, and I saw it in a completely different light. Yes, by this point, I was frightened.
If we can just rewind slightly, you gave birth to your second child.
Yes.
And you were on the postnatal ward. Can you tell us what happened when you were there?
When I went into the maternity hospital, I was taken straight to the labour suite. I wasn't put in any other room. When I had my son, those were before everybody had mobile phones and they used to bring in the payphone. So we made a telephone call to the grandparents. There was then an out of order sign put on the telephone so nobody could use it. I was put on the furthest, the nearest ward to the door. I was put in a side room and I was told that I could use, so typical maternity ward, 2 side rooms for people who have sections or problems. Main ward with about 8 beds and 2 bathrooms servicing both. I was told that I was to use the bathroom with the out of order sign on it. Clearly, although I wasn't in the hospital very long, everyone in the ward must have seen me using the bathroom that said out of order, and whether they thought I was ignoring it or whether they thought, what's going on there, I have no idea. But I was treated like a leper. Again, this would have been probably very new in the first instance, I accept that, but they were being very cautious, let's say, for patient and other babies, but maybe not particularly looking at the effect it had on me. I was a leper. It was as simple as that.
And at one stage you were breastfeeding
Yes.
your newborn.
I think I had my son about approximately 9 o'clock at night. I had breastfed my first child. No one had ever discussed my pregnancy and the hepatitis with me or breastfeeding or anything else. And at about approximately 3 o'clock the next day, in the afternoon, I had a hungry baby and he had fed all through the night. And a doctor, whom I've never seen before or since, came in and had said, "Oh, I don't know if you should be breastfeeding." And I did continue breastfeeding. They'd had 9 months to tell me and 18 hours to tell me. So I continued.
After your diagnosis, you decided you wouldn't have any more children.
That's correct.
Why was that?
There was a comment made to me at Glasgow Royal Infirmary to do with when you're pregnant, your immune system shuts down so you don't abort your fetus. And that may have been when the active virus reared its head, because I subsequently spontaneously cleared, although they didn't know. At that point, not knowing whether I had already infected my 2 children, I would have liked more children, but I was very, very scared that a subsequent pregnancy could have led to the virus returning and staying. So there were no more children.
In 1996, you went to see a liver doctor. What were you told at that appointment?
There was a general discussion about the treatment at the time, and that they thought that the infection was a very low level, so it wouldn't require treatment, and that was it.
Could we have 2247002, please, Paul? This is the letter that you think followed that appointment at the liver clinic, and if we look at the last paragraph on that first page, we can see that there is a note that it had been discussed at some length with you, and the potential therapy with interferon. And what it says is it's interesting that she was previously PCR negative on 2 occasions and now has been PCR positive on 2 occasions, the last of which showed a low total level. It would suggest to me she has a low level of viremia and as a result is at low risk of chronic liver disease and low risk of having passed this to her baby. I suspect she converted to PCR positive during pregnancy. And then if we go to the next page, it records that after careful consideration and discussion with you, we've agreed that for the time being we'll merely observe her closely in the liver clinic and see what transpires as to whether she becomes PCR negative again. For the time being, she prefers not to have interferon treatment.
Okay, so again, I only caught sight of this 8 days ago. The comment there in the previous paragraph about the virus raising, that'll be the comment that I mentioned before about not continuing to have any more children. There's a running theme through some of the letters. I haven't obviously read my medical records, but some of them, there's a recurring theme about all these lengthy in-depth conversations that have never taken place. Not with Dr. Morris, not with my GP, which is also in a previous letter. However, I have never, until 8 days ago, ever heard anything about positive tests, negative tests, multiple tests. I was told in November 2014 I had a positive test. I am unaware of multiple tests and I'm unaware of negative tests. To the extent where actually, right now, having discovered this 8 days ago, I am actually not sure what I actually am right now, to be fair. So I have never, ever been told that.
Your understanding was that you had cleared the virus naturally.
Yes.
And that's why treatment wouldn't be required.
Yes.
Was your liver assessed at this point?
No, my liver was never assessed, and the comment towards the end of that about being referred back to a clinic, that was the last conversation that anyone ever had with me about hepatitis C.
That's what my next question was. Have you ever been seen in a liver clinic again?
I've never been seen in a liver clinic, no.
Now, since then, have you ever been told that your hepatitis C PCR status was being tested?
No.
Throughout, your understanding was PCR negative. When you got your medical records a few weeks ago, what did you find?
I found that letter there. I had positive and negatives going on and off for some time. I believed that I had cleared the virus shortly after my son's birth, so 1995, 1996, and I was clear. I have discovered that I was still positive in at least 1999 and that I have been consistently tested until, there's one in 2012.
I was going to say, the records indicate, don't they, that you've been tested throughout, periodically, until about 2012.
Yes.
Have you ever been told about those tests?
No.
Because you understood you were being checked for your von Willebrands, and it was just standard bloods that were being done.
Yes, as I say, you go to the clinic, and as far as I know, we all do. As I say, you have a chat, and you literally put your arm out, and they take bloods. And I assume that they're taking a full blood count for iron, anemia, and that's all I think they're doing. I believe that they take your liver function. I believe. But that's all I think they're taking. I don't ask. They don't say.
And having obtained your records, you're now concerned about when you were tested negative, how long you were positive for, and the state of your liver, because you just don't know.
I don't know. There's never been anything done to my liver, so until now I'd have thought it was fine. No testing has ever been done. Now I'm finding out that all these years of testing, positive, negatives. Am I still positive? I have absolutely no idea. And as far as, for example, insurance is concerned, I answer honestly, so I'm financially penalised and weighted for ever even having a hepatitis test, but I have declared to the best of my knowledge and belief that I am clear. But I don't actually know now if that's true.
Before we move on from the issue of medical records, you've also recently obtained your treatment records from the UK HCDO. What did you discover in those records?
The records are quite short, as you'd expect, because I've only ever had 3 treatments. I have got maybe only 4 or 5 entries. I thought the first entry is 1992. When I got them, I thought, maybe the database is a new thing. And I phoned them, and they were created in 1960-something. So why there's no entries before 1992, I don't know. I have an entry for 1992 for DDAVP, which I was tested for in 1985 and don't respond. So it was never retested in 1992. And funnily enough, I have no entry for the 2 treatments I had for my children. There's nothing for 1990, there's nothing for 1995. When it comes to a heading for anyone treated with plasma-derived products before September 1991, it says I haven't had any. When it says, have I ever tested for hepatitis C, which is another page, it says no. And then it also says, any follow-up? And it says no. The page relating to, mad cow disease.
VCJD.
Thank you. It says that I have never been notified of that, and I have, and there's a letter in my file which actually goes on. There's another letter because I actually did discuss it with someone later on. The records are completely, factually incorrect. And I was surprised because clearly there's going to be haemophiliacs out there with lots of treatments, lots of entries to that. I wouldn't have thought it was difficult to get 3 entries correct.
You mentioned their notification of the risk of VCJD.
Yes.
You received that notification. Yes. How's that affected you?
It's another thing that's hanging over your head for potential nasty death. That has been exacerbated because someone that we know, not from, as far as we know, not from any blood, but was unwell and dead a week later, 2 years ago from mad cow. It can lie latent in the body for years and years and years. It's believed that his was from eating bad meat.
After the birth of your son,
yes.
You developed fatigue.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
I had fatigue and exhaustion. I worked full time. I managed, I suppose, but I was completely and utterly exhausted. I really struggled in the mornings. I would be 2 minutes late for work and really be very, very berated and get into a lot of trouble at work for that. And I repeatedly at the doctors said, I'm exhausted, etc., but nothing, no avail.
They put it down to you being a young mum, working hard?
Just nothing, just whatever. Nothing, get out, exercise, fresh air.
You've also developed severe anxiety, stress and chronic depression.
Yes.
You've said in your statement you're not sure what caused it, but you're concerned that the hepatitis C and the trauma of being told about it may have played a part in it. What can you tell us about what that's been like for you?
Excuse me while I read some brief notes. I had no mental health issues prior to my son being born. Date-wise, that ties in. I was exhausted, I was fatigued, I had insomnia, which made it matter worse. I became very stressed, very anxious, very agitated. I have completely changed my personality. I am not the same person I was. it became worse and worse. I masked it for a long, long while at work by taking last-minute holidays. Subsequently, I had a period off work for maybe 3 weeks, and then I managed several more years, and I was off for 7 months, and a few more years later I was off for 12 months and subsequently left employment. I became, as I say, extremely irritable. I would say I was probably a Jekyll and Hyde. My family did not know what person was coming in the door. I used to be quite patient and tolerant. I would fly off the handle. I was never physically abusive. I never swore. I swore like a trooper. Apart from working, and then when I didn't work, and part of this is to do with the trauma and the stigma, but I stopped socialising, stopped having friends, stopped going out. I am still bordering on agoraphobic. I have not been to church in the past year, which is not me. I don't see my 83-year-old mother as often as I should. She literally lives 5 minutes from me. The lack of socialisation, etc., has caused an impact clearly on my married life, because I'm just not going. I can't go. I don't want to go. It dawned on me one day that my children have never known, and I'm going to use the word normal, who knows what normal is, but it dawned on me one day, my children have never known the normal me, because this has been going on for the whole of my son's life, and there's not much between him and his sister. I'm worried that, you know, to do with nature and nurture, has this actually affected the way my behaviour is, what they consider as normal behaviour? I became completely shut off, completely isolated, withdrawn. I won't answer the door, I won't answer the phone. I'm totally lethargic. I've been lethargic for 24 years. And even after I eventually stopped working with the same company for 30 years, it wasn't that, because I struggle with mornings. Last weekend, just as a little whatever, I went to bed on Friday night and woke up on Sunday morning, and I was sleeping. I wasn't trying to sleep, I was completely sleeping. Did not get up for a drink, did not get up to the toilet. And if I had the opportunity, that's what the exhaustion and the lethargy is like. I can't make myself do things, or I try and set myself small tasks. During this, I have seen a psychiatrist. I have seen various counsellors. I ended up getting a little better when I went for mindfulness. I started doing meditation and yoga. Unfortunately, I then had fibromyalgia, so that hit a lot of that in the head. I was despairing. I was desolate. I was emotional. I have stopped watching the news. I have stopped reading a newspaper. I won't listen to anybody talking about somebody that's died. If anything else, I'll watch a comedy on the television. I kind of put a bubble around myself. I'm despairing, I'm desolate, I'm alone. I got to the stage where, and have been several times, where life's not worth living. Everybody, my husband, my children are better off without me. I'd be better off dead. I have been suicidal several times.
You've said in your statement that it's a thought pattern that becomes a very rapid
It's a very
spiral.
rapid downward spiral. And on Christmas Eve this year, I felt it happening, and it's went downhill ever since. I was lucky enough, after 20 odd years on antidepressants, to be off them for a year and a half. I was prescribed them back in January and didn't really want to take them. But 6 weeks ago, I actually was in the middle of a nervous breakdown, so I'm back on them. I would describe my life, basically, I am a barely functioning, clinically diagnosed chronic depressive with complete anxiety and stress. I have constant palpitations. As I say, a year and a half ago, I was going to a personal trainer. I was being positive, everything was great. Then the fibromyalgia was diagnosed, and it's bad. I've got chronic pain. I couldn't walk here, I had to get a taxi. So unfortunately, I can't even do simple exercise. Antidepressants add weight, so I'm in a catch-22. And that makes the depression worse, because you look in a mirror and you go, is that me? You know, it's just, and I can't get out of the cycle. And it's like, you know, nobody loves me. I think I'll go and eat worms. It's that bad. And with the best will in the world, unless you've been there, nobody understands. It must be horrendous for my family. Must be.
You've said in your statement that it's been very difficult in your marriage because of the struggle to understand what you're going through.
Yes.
You've mentioned a moment ago the fibromyalgia.
Yes.
You've also developed tension and cluster headaches.
Yes.
And the fibromyalgia has caused environmental sensitivity to smells and sounds.
Yes.
And again, you're concerned about the connection or the possible connection between fibromyalgia and the hepatitis C and what's going on there, but you don't really know at this stage.
No, I never thought there was a connection initially for a couple of reasons. I didn't realise that so many people with hepatitis C appear to fibromyalgia, but I have lived with the impression that I only had hepatitis C for a few years. And now I realise it was much longer than I thought. And therefore I'm thinking, well, I only thought it was a few years. It's been at least that many years. There could be an effect. And of course, fibromyalgia has fatigue and exhaustion. But with the depression, that's a bit chicken and egg. But the sensitivities, the itching, all of those things as well. And I'm now, I'm now starting to look back with more having access to my medical notes and sit back and start to put the dots together and the timescale, yes.
In your statement, you talk about the stigma of hepatitis C.
Mm-hmm.
If we can start by discussing your interactions with doctors over the years, what's your experience been of their reaction to your previous hepatitis C?
After the rant by my GP, it has never ever once been discussed with any GP at the practice. It's never been mentioned whatsoever. It has never been mentioned at the haemophilia unit. The odd time I've had been in hospital and it's been there, I'm either... You get some nurses who are genuinely curious about what it is and how I believe I got it. What you also get is when you're in a room and you can hear them outside the door. And you can hear them. It's not really that discreet. Even though I have a hearing aid, I can still hear them. And they're clearly talking about you. It's not pleasant. They're talking as if you're some type of scum. It's not nice.
You've described in your statement a particular incident with a doctor who didn't believe you'd been infected during childbirth. What can you tell us about that?
That was, I think, 2 years ago. Routine appointment at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary. Same set-up, height, weight. It was a female doctor who I hadn't seen before, but that's quite normal in the Royal. Obviously, you get whoever's doing the rotation. And she brought up the issue of hepatitis C, which is quite normal for a new doctor up there. And when I told her, she had said no, that was completely impossible. There was no way that I contracted hepatitis C at that time. She asked me several times, was I quite sure that I hadn't had a bleeding, been treated as a child, or one thing or another. And she was starting to get a little bit irate, but she was completely adamant that couldn't possibly have happened. I didn't quite realise until the journey home when I was sitting thinking in the car, and I thought, wait a minute, what was that about? And I don't know what that was about. I don't know whether she was trying to deflect responsibility away from the hospital. She was quite young, she wouldn't have been there then. Now, I'm wondering, was it the date, as late as December 1990, that she thought, no, that can't have been, being a younger doctor? I have no idea, but she was completely adamant that I had got it some other way.
Have you felt able to tell anyone else that you're infected?
Having been treated like a leper in the maternity hospital by medical professionals I didn't quite fancy the reception from the general public. Gradually, over the years, I have told my immediate family. Clearly, my husband had to be tested, etc., at my behest. My mother, my siblings. I never told my employer. I didn't tell any of my friends. And until now, no.
What's the effect of having to keep it within a very limited range of people? What's the effect of that been on your marriage?
Well, that clearly adds to the stress, because you've got something in your head. And even after I thought I was clear, you've still got, as I say, will it come back? Have I infected anybody else? So you've got all this constantly running through your head throughout the years, even though you try and push it to the back. So it adds to the stress and the agitation and the depression, obviously. If something's really bothering you, you want to tell people who are close to you. I'm so close to my mother, and eventually I did tell her. But the fear of the stigma and the trauma, so you're having to keep that in yourself. You can't discuss it with anybody. You can't vent. You can't, have the counsel of a friend. Well, sorry, my perception, this is clearly my perception, that's how I felt in the situation. I didn't want to face rejection again. So you're having to deal with it all internally. And that would lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and maybe venting it, as you do, to your nearest and dearest, which would be the people I live with.
And you've described in your statement that very difficult time at home with the children, with your husband, and the whole conglomeration of the anxiety, the depression, the stigma and the difficulties there.
Yes.
Do you want to say anything more about what was happening at home? Or I can read a bit from your statement.
You can read a wee bit from my statement.
You've said that... sorry, I'll just take a moment. You said that it has, the depression particularly, has severely impacted on all my relationships. My family home has been full of tension and my mood changes. You realise that the children never knew the normal you, and that you've struggled on the impact with your children of a mum who's unwell.
Yes. As I said, once upon a time I was patient and tolerant. Still can be on good days, but much less tolerant with any of them. In any normal situations that appear with any children, I could have a very short fuse. And if usually, obviously, their father would be the butt of it. And to be fair, he was very good, but there were points when heated enough. So they were never physical, but there could be quite heated, loud rows, which they clearly heard. Wasn't particularly nice.
And you've said that the family as a whole missed out on doing many things, like nights out and holidays, because you couldn't cope.
Yes, no.
You had to give up work, partly because of your depression, partly because of the fatigue, and you're now living on benefits.
Yes.
That's had a significant impact on you financially.
Yes. So I left work 20 years short of a pension. I wasn't able to get ill health retirement. Luckily, we had paid off our mortgage, and luckily my husband works, so we're a lot better off than a lot of other people, so I'm not really complaining. But I worked with the same employer for 30 years, and then all of a sudden the income halved, and we still had 2 young people to rear, put through uni, whatever else. We were very lucky, we really didn't have any debt, so we're lucky, but it is a bit of a culture shock when all of a sudden you think, let's curtail. And then, we do spoil our children a little, and then the realisation that you can't, you haven't got it. And yes, I'm lucky that I get national insurance-based ESA. I don't get any more than that because my husband works and it's means tested, but that's, you know, it's certainly better than nothing. That's good. But all the enhanced premiums that you pay for insurance, they still have to come out of half the money.
You say in your statement you struggle to obtain insurance.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I've always had life assurance. I've always told the truth. I've always told about the Vaughan Millibrands, so that the premiums for that are already weighted. When you answer the question honestly about have you ever been tested for hepatitis, which, as I say, to the best of my knowledge, I answered truly, that's then weighted another 100% on top of that, but I've always had it. But when it comes to all the cold calls I'm getting about reviewing your premiums, and they're horrified at how much I'm paying, which is fair enough, and they say, we can give you an over-the-phone review. No, you can't, because when you start saying these things, they have no idea what you're talking about, and then you get passed on to somebody else, then the underwriters, and they're phoning you back. And either they phone you back and you go, oh, no, you're better sticking where you are, or they just don't phone you back. And obviously the older you get, the harder it's getting. The fibromyalgia has only been since my last review, so it's never going to get any easier as you get older, so you just add things to the mix.
You applied for a Skipton fund payment.
I did.
But it was refused initially.
Yes.
What happened?
I found out about Skipton from family. I applied. I cannot tell you what the form was like or whatever, but I applied and I was rejected because the period of my diagnosis and my clearing was less than 6 months, which clearly is not the case, but that was the timescales. The words they should have used would have been the timescale between my infection and clearing, which was greater than 6 months. However, I didn't realise that at the time, and now we know that's not even accurate dates either, so I was rejected and that was that. I raised it several times over the years in conversation when people thought I should have got it, but I didn't attempt to reapply, no.
You recently phoned the Scottish Infected Blood Support Scheme.
I did.
And what did they say?
I have no idea why I phoned. It was straight out of the blue one day, and I phoned, and a very nice lady answered the phone in general terms. This is the state of play. She couldn't believe that I wasn't already registered with Skipton. She sent me out the forms. I went through the process of having them filled in the hospital adding their pieces, and yes, I was accepted.
So you've now been accepted by
Yes.
SIBS.
But that, to be fair, was only a year ago. And if I hadn't done it, and I don't know why I'd done it, to be honest, I would still be sitting completely oblivious.
And you've said in your statement the difficulty for you was that you hadn't been, or you thought you hadn't been infected for very long, but you were still being penalised for things like insurance.
Yeah.
And paying out more for those things.
Yes.
And yet you were being told by Skipton that you weren't
That's
eligible.
right.
But that's now been resolved by
It
SIBS.
has, yes.
Those are the questions I have for you. Is there anything else you would like to say?
I've at least one comment to do with the depression. And it's in relation to GP records as well. One of the occasions when I went to my GP, when I was suicidal, subsequently I was at the practice at the nurse, and on the computer screen in front of her, obviously open were my records. And the comment when I had seen the doctor before that said that I was suicidal, not sure, I was flippant. At which point the nurse, who was very nice, suggested another one of the GPs in the practice who had more of a mental health background. This is just an example of things that are being written in medical records. Anyone who has experience with mental health knows that quite often people with mental health, and I'm talking about suicidal, on the surface of mile, and it's all going underneath. That's just one indication of the things that are written down on records. One day at work before I left, I also decided to phone the Hepatitis Trust to ask whether they thought that the depression and the mental health issues could be related to hepatitis C, and they had told me no, which now I don't think is accurate. I couldn't get into, to be fair, a very prolonged conversation. It was lunchtime, but there were people about, and as I say, I didn't tell the MD at my work. But again, they were timescale, no. But again, we now know that timescales are inaccurate. As a slightly separate issue to this, as a side issue, I don't know if this is common with all local health authorities, but there is an issue with communication between certainly my local health authority and haemophilia units, and this has been going on for many, many years. They have been instructed to liaise with haemophilia units, and they don't. And the recent example, as recently as earlier on this year, they decided they wanted to give me a lumbar puncture. I asked them to contact Glasgow Royal, which is normal procedure, and they came back and told me, yes, they'd spoken to their haematology unit, and it was perfectly safe for me to have a lumbar puncture, but it was up to me. I didn't have the lumbar puncture. I got home and phoned Glasgow Royal Infirmary to be told, which I knew, that that was potentially fatal, and I was to take it further. Every time I needed something done, it appears as though they work in a silo. I completely accept that they have a very proficient haematology department. However, they are not haemophilia specialists, and I have to phone the secretaries time and time again, and ultimately I had to go to York Hill. So as an ongoing issue, I don't know whether that's only North Ayrshire, Ayrshire and Arm, sorry, but there seems to be, I don't know what it is, a miscommunication. They're not sharing the information, which has been, could obviously had serious repercussions. Obviously, after the outrage by the GP, again, no next steps, but I had to then phone my husband's surgery, which is a different practice, and try and bypass the receptionist because I don't want to have that conversation. And I then had to arrange to have my husband tested.
And I think we should pause there. We must be careful unless your husband's given consent, if he's here. Oh, yes. Yes, I can see you.
Sorry, I had to then arrange to have my husband tested because obviously there had been several years between being infected and being told. And therefore, without naming any names, other family members I had to arrange for testing as well. I would also like to finally say that I'm really lucky. I am really, really lucky. Physically, as far as I know, I'm lucky. Mentally, not really. I don't feel really worthy of being here today because I'm lucky. I appreciate there are people who are much worse than me and who have lost loved ones. However, I also realise that everybody has their own story, their own different value to their story. So I really do appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
I'm just going to turn and see if Mr O'Neill or Mr Dawson has anything they wish for me to raise. There's nothing else they want me to raise.
Well, I think far from your not justifying giving evidence, I think we have been very fortunate to have had it. Your story is unusual in many respects. You've shown a highlight on many aspects of communication, not just between doctor and patient, but between doctor and doctor. And that evidence is very well worth hearing. So be assured, you don't need to feel that you shouldn't be where you are.
Thank you.
And in particular, you've come to be where you are despite your mild agoraphobia or on the edge of agoraphobia, and despite not having told a number of the people who you recognise may be seeing or hearing what
Yes.
you've been saying. So that takes enormous courage. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, we'll take a break now until 10 to 4.
And I should say for those who are watching the live stream that the next witness is anonymous, and we will be turning off the video and the audio, but it will be uploaded at a later date.
So those who are watching will have nothing to see unless it is any closing remarks which are made at the end of today, which they might not think are worth listening into. We can deal now, perhaps, with what we are having tomorrow.
We can, sir. There are 3 witnesses tomorrow, and they are all anonymous.
Thank you. 10 to 4.